The champagne glass felt cold in my hand as I stood in the corner of the grand ballroom, watching my ex-husband dance with his new bride. I shouldn't have come. Every instinct told me this was a mistake, but the invitation had been so specific, so pointed. "Come celebrate our new beginning, Zara," it read in elegant script. Now I knew why. "Look what the cat dragged in," sneered Rebecca, my ex-husband's sister, as she approached with a group of his family members. Their eyes were sharp, predatory, like vultures circling fresh meat. "Why are you even here, Zara? Don't you have somewhere else to be? Somewhere more appropriate for someone like you?" The laughter that followed was harsh and deliberate. I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment, but I kept my chin up. 8-year-old Lily pressed closer to my side, her small hand finding mine. She had begged me not to come, but I thought I needed to face this, to show them I wasn't broken. "He's moved on to a real woman now," Rebecca continued, gesturing toward the bride who was spinning in her flowing white dress. "Someone who knows how to keep a man happy, if you know what I mean." More laughter erupted from the group. "A real woman who won't drive him away with her impossible standards," added his cousin Mark. "Poor Thomas was miserable with you. Look how happy he is now." I wanted to leave, but my feet felt rooted to the marble floor. This was exactly what they wanted to see me crumble, to confirm their narrative that I was the problem in our marriage. But I had learned something in the 2 years since our divorce. Their words only had power if I gave them power. "Mommy," Lily whispered urgently, tugging on my sleeve. Her voice carried an odd tension that made me look down at her. "We need to go. No. Something bad is going to happen. Trust me." The urgency in her voice cut through my paralysis. Lily had always been intuitive, almost eerily so. When she spoke like this, I listened. I nodded and started heading for the exit, but Rebecca blocked our path. "Running away again?" she taunted. "That's so typical. No wonder Thomas had to find comfort elsewhere while you were still married." That stopped me cold. The implication hung in the air like poison. But before I could respond, chaos erupted across the ballroom. Thomas's voice boomed over the microphone, slurred and angry. "This is all wrong," he shouted, swaying dangerously on the small stage where the band had been playing. "This whole wedding is a lie." The music stopped abruptly. Guests turned to stare as Thomas grabbed the microphone stand for support, his face flushed red with alcohol and something else, desperation. "You want to know the truth?" he yelled, pointing a shaking finger at his new bride. "She trapped me. Said she was pregnant when she wasn't. Just like she trapped me into leaving my wife." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The bride, Elena, stood frozen in horror, her perfect makeup running as tears started flowing. But Thomas wasn't finished. "And my family." He swung the microphone toward Rebecca and the others who had just been tormenting me. "You all pushed me to leave Zara because she wouldn't give you money? Because she saw right through your schemes." Rebecca's face went white. The cousin who had mocked me suddenly found the floor very interesting. "Zara was the best thing that ever happened to me, and I threw it away for what? For people who only wanted what she could provide? For a woman who lied to get me to the altar?" The bride ran from the room in tears. Guests began whispering frantically, some pulling out phones to record the spectacle. But Thomas wasn't done humiliating himself. "I've been trying to get her back for months," he continued, his voice breaking. "Calling, texting, begging. But she won't even look at me. And why should she? I chose these vultures over the woman who actually loved me." Security finally reached the stage and gently removed the microphone from Thomas's grip. The ballroom erupted in chaos, some guests trying to comfort the runaway bride, others whispering scandal, and Thomas's family looking like they wanted to disappear into the floor. Lily squeezed my hand. "I told you something bad would happen," she whispered. "But it wasn't bad for us, was it, Mommy?" She was right. As I looked around at the destruction of what was supposed to be Thomas's perfect new beginning, I felt something I hadn't expected: relief. Not because his life was falling apart, but because his public confession had finally revealed the truth I'd been too polite to speak. "No, baby," I whispered back, lifting her into my arms. "It wasn't bad for us at all." As we walked toward the exit, I held my head high. Behind us, I could hear Rebecca frantically trying to do damage control, but it was too late. The truth was out and everyone had heard it. For the first time in 2 years, I felt completely free. The video went viral within hours. Someone had live-streamed Thomas's meltdown, and by Monday morning, "Wedding Disaster Groom Confession" was trending on 3 different social media platforms. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from friends, family, and even strangers who had somehow gotten my number. "Girl, you dodged a bullet the size of a freight train," my best friend Nina said as she sat in my kitchen, scrolling through the comments on her tablet. Listen to this one. That woman must be a saint for putting up with that family for as long as she did. I poured myself another cup of coffee, trying to process everything that had happened. Lily was at school, thankfully unaware of the social media storm surrounding her father's spectacular breakdown. I had managed to shield her from most of the ugly details of our divorce, and I intended to keep it that way. The comments aren't what bother me, I said, settling into the chair across from Nina. It's that I wasted 7 years of my life with someone who was so easily influenced by people who didn't even care about him. Nina looked up from her tablet, her brown eyes serious. You didn't waste anything, Zara. You got Lily out of that marriage and you learned what you won't accept in the future. That's not nothing. She was right, but it still stung. I thought about the early days with Thomas when he seemed different. Before his family started whispering in his ear about how I wasn't contributing enough to their family wealth, before Rebecca started making snide comments about my fancy job and uppity attitude. I had been working as an interior designer for a high-end firm then, making good money and building a reputation. But Thomas's family saw my success as a threat, especially when I refused to invest in his brother's failing restaurant or lend money to his cousin's questionable business ventures. The worst part, I said, staring out the window at my small but carefully maintained garden, is that I actually started to doubt myself. When someone you love tells you repeatedly that you're too demanding, too independent, too much of everything, you start to wonder if maybe they're right. But you never changed who you were, Nina pointed out. Even when the pressure was at its worst, you kept working, kept taking care of Lily, kept being yourself. That's strength, not stubbornness. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from an unknown number. Zara, this is Thomas. Please, we need to talk. I meant everything I said at the wedding. I was drunk, but I was telling the truth. Can we meet? I showed the text to Nina, who made a face like she'd smelled something rotten. Please tell me you're not even considering it. Of course not, I said, blocking the number. That ship didn't just sail, Nina. It sank to the bottom of the ocean and became a coral reef. She laughed, but I could see the worry in her eyes. Just promise me you won't let him guilt trip you if he shows up at your door. You know he will. She was probably right. Thomas had always been persistent when he wanted something, and his public confession suggested he was more desperate than ever. But I had spent 2 years building a life without him, and I wasn't about to let him tear it down. After Nina left, I sat in my living room and really looked around. The space was entirely mine now, decorated in the soft blues and greens I loved, filled with books and plants and Lily's artwork. When I lived with Thomas, our house had been all beige and brown, sophisticated colors chosen by his mother, who insisted on having input on everything. I picked up a photo from the side table, Lily and me at the beach last summer, both of us grinning at the camera with sand in our hair and genuine joy on our faces. That trip had been the first vacation I'd taken in years where I hadn't felt guilty for spending money or worried about whether I was being too indulgent. My laptop chimed with an email notification. It was from Patricia Winters, the senior partner at the design firm where I used to work. The subject line read, "Interesting opportunity." "Hi Zara," the email began. "I've been following the social media situation, and while I'm sorry you had to go through that, I have to say your grace under pressure was remarkable. I have a client who specifically requested you for a high-end residential project. She said she wants to work with someone who knows how to handle difficult situations with class. Are you interested in taking on freelance work? The budget is substantial." I stared at the email for a long moment. I had been working part-time at a smaller firm since the divorce, mainly because I needed the flexibility to be available for Lily. But this sounded like something bigger. Maybe it was time to stop playing it safe. I typed back a simple response. "I'm very interested. When can we meet?" As I hit send, I felt something shift inside me. For 2 years, I had focused on surviving, on building a stable life for Lily and me. But maybe it was time to start thriving. My phone buzzed with another text from a different unknown number. "This is Rebecca. We need to talk about Thomas. He's not handling this well." I deleted the message without responding. Thomas's well-being was no longer my responsibility, and neither was managing his family's damage control. I was done being their solution to problems they created themselves. The meeting with Patricia's client went better than I had dared to hope. Sandra Morrison was a successful lawyer who had recently bought a historic mansion in the city's most exclusive neighborhood. She wanted a complete renovation that would honor the home's original character while making it functional for modern life. "I've been following your work since you were at Patricia's firm," Sandra said as we walked through the mansion's empty rooms. "But honestly, what convinced me to specifically request you was how you handled yourself at that wedding disaster. Anyone who can maintain that level of composure under public humiliation has exactly the kind of professionalism I need. The project would take 6 months and pay more than I had made in the entire previous year. It was also exactly the kind of work I loved, taking something with good bones and helping it reach its full potential. There's one condition, Sandra added as we stood in the mansion's grand foyer. I want full creative control to remain with you. No input from husbands, in-laws, or anyone else who isn't directly paying the bill. I've seen too many beautiful projects ruined by committee. I almost laughed. If she only knew how perfect that condition was for me. That sounds ideal, I said. When would you like to start? Tomorrow if possible. I'm moving in 6 months and I want this to be perfect. As I drove home I couldn't stop smiling. This was the kind of opportunity one had dreamed about but never thought I'd get. For years, Thomas had discouraged me from taking on bigger projects, claiming they would take too much time away from family responsibilities. Looking back, I realized he had been threatened by my success. Lily was at after-school care, so I had an hour to process everything before picking her up. I pulled into our driveway and sat in the car for a moment, looking at our little house. It wasn't much compared to the mansion I'd just toured, but it was ours. My phone rang. The caller ID showed my mother's number. "Sweetheart, I saw the news," Mom said as soon as I answered. "Are you okay?" "I'm great actually," I said and meant it. "Better than I've been in years." "Good. I never liked Thomas. Too weak. A strong woman needs a man who won't be intimidated by her success." My mother had never said this before, but I wasn't surprised. She had raised me to be independent after my father left when I was 10. She worked 2 jobs to put herself through nursing school and had always taught me that I should never need a man, I should want one. "Right now, I'm focused on Lily and building my business," I said. "Romance can wait." "Don't wait too long," she warned. "You're young and beautiful, and you deserve someone who appreciates what a catch you are." After we hung up, I sat in my driveway a little longer. The truth was, I wasn't sure I was ready to trust anyone with my heart again. Thomas had damaged something in me that was still healing. But first I had work to do. I spent the evening creating a project timeline for Sandra's mansion. Lily did her homework at the kitchen table beside me, occasionally asking for help with math problems or sharing stories from school. "Mommy, why was Daddy acting so weird at that wedding?" she asked suddenly, not looking up from her worksheet. I had been dreading this question. "Sometimes adults make mistakes when they're feeling confused or upset," I said carefully. "Your daddy said some things he probably wishes he hadn't said. Are you sad about it?" I considered lying, giving her the answer I thought she wanted to hear. But Lily was smart and she deserved honesty. "No, baby. I'm not sad. I'm actually proud of how we handled it. We stayed calm and left when things got uncomfortable. That's exactly what we should have done." She nodded seriously. "Good. I didn't like how those people were talking to you. They were being mean." "Yes, they were. But their meanness says more about them than it does about us." "I'm glad we left when we did," she said, returning to her math. "I had a feeling something bad was going to happen." "You have good instincts, sweetheart. Always trust your feelings." That night, after Lily was asleep, I sat at my computer and created a business plan. If Sandra's project went well, I could use it as a springboard to launch my own firm. I had been playing it safe for too long, taking smaller projects and limiting my vision. It was time to bet on myself. I was deep in research about business licenses when my phone buzzed with yet another text from an unknown number. "Zara, please. I know you're blocking my numbers, but I need to explain. The wedding was a disaster, but it made me realize what I've lost. Can we just talk? For Lily's sake?" I stared at the message for a long moment. Using Lily as leverage was a new low, even for Thomas. Our daughter was thriving in our current situation. She was happy, confident, and doing well in school. The last thing she needed was the chaos of her father's midlife crisis disrupting her stability. I blocked the number and made a mental note to contact my lawyer about documenting Thomas's increasingly desperate attempts at contact. If this escalated, I wanted to be prepared. But as I finally headed to bed, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: excitement about the future. Tomorrow I would start the biggest project of my career. I had a beautiful daughter who trusted my judgment. I had a home that was truly mine. For the first time since my divorce, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. 3 months into Sandra's project, I was busier than I had ever been in my life. Word had spread through Sandra's social circle, and I suddenly had a waiting list of potential clients. The mansion renovation was featured in a local magazine, and the photographer had captured exactly what I'd hoped to achieve: a perfect blend of historic elegance and modern comfort. "You're glowing," Nina observed as we met for lunch at our favorite cafe. Success looks good on you. She was right. I felt more like myself than I had in years. Every morning, I woke up excited about the work ahead. Lily was flourishing too. Her grades had improved even more, and she had joined the school's art club. I have news, I said, pulling out my phone to show Nina a photo. Look at this space. The image showed a beautiful commercial building downtown with large windows and high ceilings. It's for rent, and it would be perfect for a design studio. I could meet clients there, store samples, maybe even host workshops. Nina's eyes lit up. Are you thinking of opening your own firm? I already am. I filed the paperwork last week. Z. Parker Interior Design is officially in business. We clinked coffee cups in celebration, but Nina's expression grew serious. How is Thomas handling your success? I sighed. The texts had continued, becoming more frequent and more desperate. He'd started sending flowers to my house, which I immediately threw away. Last week, he'd even shown up at Lily's school, but the administration had called me before allowing him to see her. He's becoming a problem, I admitted. But my lawyer says as long as he's not threatening me or interfering with Lily's routine, there's not much I can do legally. What about that restraining order? I need more evidence of harassment. Pathetic texts and unwanted flowers aren't enough apparently. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, a new one since I kept blocking them. But this time the message wasn't from Thomas. Hi Zara, this is Julian Brooks. I was at Sandra Morrison's cocktail party last night and saw your work on her house. I'd love to discuss a potential project. Are you available for lunch tomorrow? I showed the message to Nina, who immediately pulled out her own phone and started typing. What are you doing? Looking him up, she said, scrolling rapidly. Julian Brooks. Oh my God, Zara. Look at this. She turned her phone toward me. Julian Brooks was apparently a successful businessman who owned several restaurants and had recently opened a boutique hotel downtown. The photo showed a man in his late 30s with kind eyes and an easy smile. He's gorgeous, Nina said. And successful. And he wants to have lunch with you. It's about work, Nina. A potential project. Aha. When's the last time a potential male client invited you to lunch instead of meeting at his property? She had a point, but I wasn't ready to think about dating. My life was finally stable and successful. Did I really want to complicate it with romance? I texted back, I'd be happy to discuss your project. Would you prefer to meet at the property you're considering redesigning? His response came quickly, actually, I'd like to get to know your aesthetic philosophy first. Lunch would be perfect. How about tomorrow at 12:30 at Meridian? Meridian was one of the nicest restaurants in the city. Either this was a very expensive consultation, or Nina was right about his intentions. I'll go, I decided, but it's purely professional. Nina raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. That evening, I was helping Lily with her science project when someone rang our doorbell. Through the window, I could see Thomas's car in the driveway. Stay in your room, sweetheart, I told Lily, who had gone tense at the sound. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. Thomas looked terrible, unshaven, wrinkled clothes, dark circles under his eyes. Zara, please. I just need 5 minutes. No. You need to leave. Now. I lost my job, he said desperately. Elena left me. My family won't talk to me. I have nothing left. That's not my problem, Thomas. But it could be our solution. We could start over. I know I messed up, but... There is no we, I interrupted. There hasn't been for 2 years. You made your choices. I was confused. My family was pressuring me and Elena was manipulative, and I thought. You thought you could trade up. You thought you could find someone who would cost you less and give you more. But life doesn't work that way. He stepped closer and I instinctively moved back. I know you still care about me. We have history. We have Lily. We have a daughter together. That's all. Mommy? Lily's voice came from behind me. She had disobeyed my instruction to stay in her room, and now she stood in the hallway looking frightened. Hi, baby girl, Thomas said, his voice softening. How are you? I'm fine, Lily said quietly, moving closer to me. Are you okay, Daddy? You look sick. The concern in her voice broke my heart. Despite everything, she still loved her father. I'm just tired, he told her. But I'm going to be fine. I promise. Good, she said. Mommy and I are doing really well. She's starting her own business and everything. Thomas's face fell slightly. That's wonderful, sweetheart. You need to go, I said firmly. Lily has school tomorrow. He looked like he wanted to argue, but something in my expression must have convinced him otherwise. Can I call you? To set up regular visits with Lily? You can call my lawyer. After he left, Lily and I finished her science project in silence. But as I was tucking her into bed, she looked up at me with serious eyes. Daddy seems really sad, she said. Yes, he does. But you seem really happy. I'm happy, baby. Very happy. Good, she said, settling into her pillow. I like it better when you're happy. As I turned off her light, I realized she was right. I was happy. For the first time in years, I was genuinely, completely happy with my life. Tomorrow I would have lunch with Julian Brooks, and maybe it would lead to a new project. Maybe it would lead to something else entirely. But tonight, I was exactly where I wanted to be. The lunch with Julian had exceeded all my expectations. Not only did he want to hire me to redesign his new hotel's lobby and restaurant, but he had also been charming, intelligent, and refreshingly straightforward. When he asked if I'd like to have dinner sometime, not business-related, I surprised myself by saying yes. Our first date was scheduled for Friday night, and I found myself actually looking forward to it. It had been so long since I'd felt excited about the possibility of romance. But on Wednesday morning, my good mood was shattered when I arrived at my new studio space to find Thomas sitting on the front steps. How did you find me here? I demanded, my keys clutched tightly in my hand. I followed you yesterday, he said, standing up slowly. Zara, we need to talk. We have nothing to discuss. And following me is stalking Thomas. That's illegal. I'm desperate, he said, his voice cracking. I've lost everything. My job, my wife, my family's respect. The only thing I have left is the hope that maybe we can fix this. We can't fix anything because we're not broken together. We're divorced. You chose that. I unlocked the studio door and stepped inside, but he followed me. The space was still mostly empty, just some fabric samples, a desk, and a few chairs. But it was mine, and his presence felt like a violation. Look around you, he said, gesturing at the studio. This is all happening because of our divorce. You're successful now because I pushed you to be independent. I stared at him in disbelief. You're actually trying to take credit for my success? I'm just saying that maybe this was all meant to happen. Maybe we needed to apart so we could come back together stronger. Thomas, listen to me very carefully, I said, setting my purse down on the desk and facing him directly. I am successful now because I'm no longer being held back by your insecurity and your family's manipulation. I'm happy because you're not in my life anymore. There is no universe in which we get back together. But Lily needs her father. Lily has her father. You can see her according to our custody agreement. But that doesn't mean I have to pretend our marriage was anything other than a mistake. His face twisted with anger. A mistake? 7 years was a mistake. The mistake was staying as long as I did, I said calmly. The mistake was believing you when you said your family would eventually accept me. The mistake was thinking I could make you happy by making myself smaller. I never asked you to make yourself smaller. You didn't have to ask. Every time I got a promotion, you found a reason to be upset. Every time I wanted to take on a bigger project, you complained about me working too much. Every time your family insulted me, you made excuses for them instead of defending me. They were just protective. They were jealous. And you were too weak to stand up to them. The words hung in the air between us. I had never been this direct about what had really destroyed our marriage, but seeing him here in my new space, trying to diminish my achievements, made me angry in a way I hadn't allowed myself to feel before. I loved you, he said quietly. You loved the idea of me. The successful, beautiful wife who would make you look good. But you didn't love me enough to protect me from people who wanted to tear me down. My phone rang. It was Julian. Hi, I answered, not taking my eyes off Thomas. Good morning, beautiful. I know this is short notice, but I have tickets to the symphony tomorrow night. Would you like to go? I could see Thomas's face change as he realized I was talking to another man. That sounds wonderful, I said. I'll see you at 8? Perfect. I'm looking forward to it. After I hung up, Thomas stared at me with a mixture of hurt and rage. You're dating someone. Yes, I am. And it's none of your business. What about our family? What about giving Lily a stable home with both parents? Lily has a stable home. With me. You gave up your right to have an opinion about our family when you chose your sister's jealousy over your wife's happiness. This isn't over, Zara. Yes, it is. And if you show up here again or at my house or anywhere else I haven't invited you, I'm calling the police. After he left, I sat in my empty studio for a long time, shaking. I had finally said everything I'd been holding back for 2 years, and it felt both liberating and exhausting. But I also felt something else, Clarity. For months, some small part of me had wondered if I was being too harsh, too unforgiving. Seeing Thomas today, watching him try to manipulate me and take credit for my success, confirmed that I had made the right choice. My phone buzzed with a text from Nina. How did the hotel consultation go yesterday? Did you get the job? I smiled as I typed back, got the job and a date to the symphony. Life is good. Her response was immediate, details? Now. As I looked around my studio, I felt a surge of pride. This space represented everything Thomas had tried to convince me I couldn't achieve. In 6 months, it would be full of samples and sketches and the tools of a thriving business. And he would have absolutely nothing to do with it. That evening, I told Lily about the symphony date over dinner. Is he nice? She asked, twirling spaghetti around her fork. He seems very nice. But it's just a date, sweetheart. We're getting to know each other. Good, she said matter-of-factly. You deserve someone nice. Daddy wasn't always nice to you. The observation surprised me. I thought I had hidden most of the marital problems from her. What makes you say that? He used to make you sad a lot. You don't get sad like that anymore. She was right. I had forgotten what it felt like to not carry that constant weight of trying to make someone else happy while losing myself in the process. You're very wise, little girl, I said, reaching over to smooth her hair. I know, she replied with a grin. I get it from my mom. For the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly who I was supposed to be. 6 months later, my studio was thriving beyond my wildest dreams. I had completed Sandra's mansion, Julian's hotel, and 3 other major projects. The local design magazine had featured my work on their cover, and I had a waiting list that stretched 4 months out. Julian and I had been dating steadily, and I was surprised by how easy it felt. He was everything Thomas wasn't, secure in his own success, supportive of my ambitions, and completely uninterested in changing me to fit some ideal in his head. You know what I love most about you? He said as we walked through the park near my house. It was a Saturday morning, and Lily was at a friend's house for a sleepover. My devastating wit and stunning beauty? I suggested, laughing. Well, yes, obviously, but I was going to say your ambition. You know exactly what you want and you go after it without apology. It's incredibly attractive. I stopped walking and looked at him. Really? You don't think I'm too focused on work? Too independent? Why would I think that? Your success doesn't diminish mine. If anything, it makes me want to work harder to keep up with you. The contrast with my marriage couldn't have been starker. Thomas had always made my achievements feel like criticisms of his own ambitions. I have something to tell you, I said, taking his hand. I got a call yesterday from a developer in Atlanta. They want me to design the interiors for their entire luxury high-rise project. 24 units, plus common areas. Julian's face lit up. Zara, that's incredible. That's huge. It would mean traveling back and forth for the next 8 months. And it would definitely establish me as more than just a local designer. You have to take it. But what about us? What about Lily? I'd be gone several days each month. Julian stopped walking and turned to face me fully. Zara, I'm not going anywhere. And Lily is smart enough to understand that her mom is building something amazing. Besides, Atlanta is only a 2-hour flight. We'll make it work. That afternoon, I called the developer and accepted the project. As I hung up the phone, I felt a familiar surge of excitement mixed with terror. This was the biggest opportunity of my career, and for the first time, I had a partner who was genuinely happy for my success. The next few weeks flew by in a whirlwind of planning and preparation. I hired 2 assistants to help manage my local projects while I focused on Atlanta. Lily adjusted to the travel schedule better than I had expected, especially when Julian started taking her to dinner and movies on the nights I was away. He's not trying to replace Daddy, she told me one evening as I tucked her into bed after returning from Atlanta. He's just Julian. And he makes you smile a lot. Does that bother you? No. Daddy makes me worried sometimes. Julian makes me feel safe. Her words hit me harder than I had expected. Thomas's desperate behavior had been escalating despite my warnings. He had started showing up at Lily's school events uninvited, making scenes when other parents asked about our reconciliation. Last week, he had cornered my mother at the grocery store, begging her to convince me to give him another chance. Has Daddy been saying things to you? About Julian or about us getting back together? Lily nodded reluctantly. He asks if Julian is nice to me. And he says maybe someday we can all be a family again. I felt a surge of anger. Using Lily to get information about my relationship crossed a line I hadn't even known existed. Sweetheart, Daddy and I are never getting back together. And it's not fair for him to make you think we might. That's an adult conversation that he should be having with me, not with you. I know, she said quietly. I told him you were happy now and he got sad. But I don't want to lie. You never have to lie. But you also don't have to answer questions that make you uncomfortable. If Daddy asks about Julian or about our life, you can tell him to talk to me instead. The next morning I called my lawyer. I need to document Thomas's behavior, I told him. He's involving Lily in adult conversations about our relationship, and he's harassing my family members. Has he threatened you or Lily? Not directly. But he's becoming more desperate, and I'm worried about what he might do next. Keep documenting everything. Dates, times, what was said. If he continues to escalate, we may have grounds for a restraining order. That week, while I was in Atlanta, Julian called with disturbing news. Thomas showed up at my restaurant last night, he said. He was drunk and asking questions about you. My manager had to ask him to leave. My stomach dropped. What kind of questions? About our relationship, about whether I was serious about you. He kept saying you were still married in God's eyes and that I was interfering with his family. I'm so sorry. This is exactly what I was afraid of. Don't apologize. You're not responsible for his behavior. But I think you should know he also asked about your travel schedule. Specifically, when you'd be back from Atlanta. That was the final straw. I called my lawyer immediately and filed for a restraining order. But even as I dealt with Thomas's increasingly erratic behavior, my career continued to soar. The Atlanta project was going perfectly, and I had been approached by developers in 2 other cities. I was building the kind of business I had only dreamed about. Most importantly, I was building it on my own terms. You know what's funny? I told Julian during one of our weekly dinner dates. Thomas used to say that my ambition would make me lonely. That no man would want a woman who was more successful than he was. He was projecting his own insecurity, Julian said simply. A real man isn't threatened by his partner's success. He's proud of it. How did you get so wise about relationships? I watched my parents. My dad always said my mom was the smartest person he knew, and he meant it as a compliment, not a complaint. They were partners, not competitors. I reached across the table and took his hand. I love that you see it that way. I love that you never apologize for being brilliant. As we walked to our cars after dinner, I felt more content than I had in years. My business was thriving, my daughter was happy and secure, and I was falling in love with a man who celebrated my strength instead of fearing it. But as I unlocked my car, I noticed a piece of paper tucked under the windshield wiper. My heart sank as I unfolded it. I know you're happy now, but happiness built on lies doesn't last. He doesn't know you like I do. He doesn't know about your moods, your demands, your impossible standards. When he figures out what you're really like, he'll leave too. Then you'll come back to me. I'll be waiting. Julian read the note over my shoulder. We're calling the police, he said firmly. The restraining order should be approved next week, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. This isn't just harassment anymore, Zara. This is stalking. And these words, they're designed to make you doubt yourself and your relationship with me. He was right. Reading Thomas's words, I felt a familiar stab of self-doubt. What if Julian did get tired of my ambition? What if Thomas was right about my impossible standards? But then I looked at Julian's face, not frustrated or angry, but concerned for my safety and determined to protect me. You're nothing like he says you are, Julian said quietly. You're driven, yes. You have high standards, absolutely. But those are strengths, not flaws. And anyone who can't see that doesn't deserve you. As I drove home that night, I realized something important. Thomas's note hadn't just been an attempt to undermine my new relationship. It had been a reminder of how he had always made me feel like I was too much, too demanding, too difficult to love. But Julian made me feel like I was exactly enough. And that made all the difference. The restraining order was approved on a Tuesday morning in November. By Thursday, Thomas had violated it. He showed up at my studio while I was meeting with a client, banging on the door and shouting that he needed to talk to me. When I called the police, they arrested him on the spot. He'll likely spend the night in jail and then be released with a warning, Officer Martinez explained as Thomas was led away in handcuffs. But if he violates the order again, he'll face serious charges. My client, thankfully, was understanding about the disruption. She had been through her own difficult divorce and completely supported my decision to involve law enforcement. But what happened next surprised everyone. The local news picked up the story of Thomas's arrest, and suddenly his wedding meltdown video resurfaced with new context. The narrative shifted from crazy groom confession to pattern of harassment against successful ex-wife. By Friday morning, my phone was ringing constantly. 3 different news stations wanted to interview me about domestic harassment. A women's advocacy group asked me to speak at their upcoming conference. And most surprisingly, several other women reached out to share their own stories of being stalked by ex-husbands who couldn't accept their independence. "You've become a symbol," Nina said as we watched the evening news coverage together. "Look at this." The news story featured interviews with experts on post-divorce harassment, statistics about stalking cases, and commentary about how difficult it can be for successful women to leave controlling relationships. "I never wanted to be a symbol," I said. "I just wanted to be left alone to build my business." "But maybe this is bigger than just you," Nina suggested. "Maybe your story can help other women who are dealing with the same thing." She was right. Over the next few days, I received dozens of messages from women sharing their own experiences. Many of them said they had been afraid to seek restraining orders because they didn't think their ex-husband's behavior was serious enough. One message particularly stood out. "Dear Zara, I've been following your story and it gave me the courage to file for my own restraining order. My ex-husband has been showing up at my workplace and following me to my daughter's school for months. I thought I had to just deal with it because we have a child together. Thank you for showing me that I deserve to feel safe. Rebecca." I stared at the name. Could this be the same Rebecca who had humiliated me at Thomas's wedding? I looked up the sender's social media profile, and my suspicions were confirmed. It was indeed Thomas's sister. Her message continued, "I know I was terrible to you at the wedding. I was angry about the divorce and I blamed you for our family falling apart. But watching Thomas these past few months, seeing how he's been treating you and involving Lily, I realize I was wrong about everything. You were never the problem. I'm sorry." I showed the message to Julian, who shook his head in amazement. "The irony," he said. "The person who was most cruel to you at that wedding is now asking for your help." I thought about it for a long time before responding. Part of me wanted to ignore the message entirely. Rebecca had been vicious in her attacks on me, and her behavior had contributed to the breakdown of my marriage. But another part of me recognized that she was reaching out in a moment of vulnerability, asking for help with a situation I understood all too well. I finally wrote back, "I'm sorry you're going through this. No one deserves to be stalked or harassed regardless of our past issues. I hope you stay safe and that your restraining order is approved." Her response came quickly, "Thank you for being kinder to me than I deserve. You're a better person than I gave you credit for." Meanwhile, Thomas's behavior continued to deteriorate. According to mutual friends, he had been fired from his temporary job for excessive absences. Elena had filed for divorce and was reportedly seeking spousal support. His parents had finally acknowledged that his problems went deeper than just divorce stress and were trying to convince him to seek professional help. "He's lost everything," my mother said during one of our weekly phone calls. "Maybe now he'll finally get the help he needs." "Maybe," I said. "But that's not my responsibility anymore. I'm proud of you for maintaining that boundary. For years, I watched you twist yourself into knots trying to fix problems that weren't yours to solve." She was right. Throughout my marriage, I had constantly tried to manage Thomas's moods, mediate between him and his family, and find ways to make everyone happy. It had been exhausting and ultimately futile. Now, I was learning what it felt like to focus on my own happiness and success without constantly worrying about someone else's emotional state. The Atlanta project was nearing completion, and the developer had already asked me to design their next 2 buildings. I had also been approached by a luxury hotel chain that wanted to rebrand their entire portfolio with my aesthetic. "You're going to need to expand your team," Julian observed as we reviewed my project calendar over dinner. "At this rate, you'll be booked solid for the next 2 years. I know. It's exciting and terrifying at the same time. What's terrifying about it? I considered the question. I guess I'm afraid of getting too big too fast. What if I can't maintain the quality? What if I disappoint people? Those are the worries of someone who cares about excellence," Julian said. "That's exactly why you'll succeed." As I looked across the table at him, I felt a rush of gratitude. Julian had been my steady support through Thomas's harassment, my business expansion, and all the challenges of building a new life. He celebrated my wins without trying to claim credit, and he offered comfort during setbacks without trying to solve problems that were mine to handle. "I have something to tell you," I said, suddenly nervous. "I love you." His face broke into a smile. "I love you too. I have for months. Why didn't you say anything? I was waiting for you to be ready to hear it. You've been through a lot, and I didn't want to pressure you." I reached across the table and took his hand. "I'm ready now. For all of it." As we walked to our cars after dinner, I felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with any project or achievement. For the first time in years, I felt truly free from the weight of trying to fix someone else's problems, free from the constant self-doubt that had plagued my marriage, free to build the life I actually wanted. Thomas had tried to convince me that my independence would lead to loneliness. Instead, it had led me to real love with a man who saw my strength as a gift, not a threat. The tables had indeed turned, but not in the way anyone had expected. Spring brought new opportunities and deeper contentment than I had ever known. My business had grown to include 5 employees, and we had moved to a larger studio space downtown. The expansion felt natural and exciting rather than overwhelming, especially with Julian's steady support and practical advice. "I still can't believe you're the same woman who used to apologize for working late," Nina said as we toured my new office space. "You've become this confident CEO, and it suits you perfectly." She was right. Leading a team, managing multiple high-profile projects, and making strategic business decisions felt as natural as breathing. I wondered sometimes what would have happened if I had started my own firm years earlier, but I had learned not to dwell on what-ifs. Lily was thriving too. Now 9 years old, she had developed her own sense of style and confidence that reminded me of myself at her age. She loved visiting the studio after school, helping organize fabric samples and asking thoughtful questions about design principles. "When I grow up, I want to build houses like you do," she announced one afternoon as she arranged paint chips by color gradation. "I design the insides of houses," I corrected gently. "But if you want to build them, you could become an architect." "Can I be both? An architect and a designer?" "You can be anything you want, sweetheart. The world is full of possibilities." Julian had become a natural part of our routine. He joined us for dinner most weeknights, helped Lily with homework when I was traveling, and had even learned to braid her hair for school. But he never tried to replace Thomas or position himself as Lily's new father. Instead, he carved out his own role as a trusted adult who genuinely cared about her well-being. "Julian makes everything feel calm," Lily observed one evening as we made cookies together. "With Daddy, everything always felt loud." I knew exactly what she meant. Thomas's presence had always brought an undercurrent of tension, worry about his mood, his family's approval, his next complaint or demand. Julian's presence brought peace. It was Julian who suggested we take a weekend trip to the mountains in May. "Just the 3 of us," he said. "No work calls, no deadlines, no stress. Just hiking in Esmores and terrible board games." The cabin he rented was perfect, rustic but comfortable, with a view of the lake and hiking trails that were challenging enough to be interesting but not so difficult that Lily couldn't manage them. On our second night there, after Lily had fallen asleep in the cabin's loft bedroom, Julian and I sat on the deck watching stars reflect on the lake water. "I have something for you," he said, pulling a small velvet box from his jacket pocket. My heart stopped. "Julian?" "Before you panic," he said with a smile, "let me explain. I know we've only been together for 8 months, and I know you're not ready for anything official yet. But I also know that I want to spend the rest of my life making you as happy as you make me." He opened the box to reveal a stunning vintage engagement ring, an emerald-cut diamond surrounded by smaller stones in an Art Deco setting. "This was my grandmother's ring," he said. "She was an artist who didn't get married until she was 35 because she refused to settle for anyone who didn't support her dreams. When she met my grandfather, she knew immediately that he was different." I stared at the ring, overwhelmed by the gesture's thoughtfulness and significance. "I'm not asking you to marry me right now," Julian continued. "I'm asking if you'll consider the possibility. If you'll wear this ring as a promise that we're building something real together." Julian, I struggled to find words that could express the complex mix of love, fear, and hope swirling in my chest. "You don't have to answer tonight. Just think about it." But I already knew my answer. Looking at Julian's patient, loving face in the moonlight, I realized that my fear wasn't about him or our relationship. My fear was about believing I deserved this kind of love. "Yes," I whispered. "Yes, you'll think about it? Yes, I'll marry you. Someday. When we're both ready." His smile was brighter than the moon as he slipped the ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for me all along. The next morning, Lily noticed the ring immediately. "Is that an engagement ring?" she asked over pancakes, her voice carefully neutral. "It is," I said. "Julian asked me to marry him and I said yes." I watched her face carefully, prepared for any reaction. But after a moment she smiled. "Good," she said simply. "I was hoping you would." "You were?" "Julian loves you the right way. Like how Grandma and Grandpa love each other in those old pictures. Like you're the most important person in the world to him." out of the mouths of babes. She had captured exactly what made Julian different from Thomas. He loved me like I was precious, not like I was a project to be managed or a problem to be solved. When we returned from our mountain weekend, the news of our engagement spread quickly through our circle of friends and family. The reaction was overwhelmingly positive, which surprised me given how recently I had been divorced. "You seem different with him," my mother observed during Sunday brunch. "Lighter. More like yourself." "I feel more like myself," I admitted. "Julian doesn't need me to be anyone other than who I am. That's how it should be." But not everyone was happy about our engagement. Thomas had apparently heard the news through mutual acquaintances, and his response was swift and ugly. He left a voicemail on my office phone. "So you're engaged now? After everything we built together, after 7 years of marriage, you're just going to replace me like I never mattered? What are you going to tell Lily when this one realizes what you're really like and leaves too?" I saved the voicemail and forwarded it to my lawyer. Thomas was still technically under a restraining order, and any contact violated its terms. But his words didn't have the power to hurt me the way they once would have. I knew who I was now, and I knew the difference between love and manipulation. That evening, as Julian and I discussed preliminary wedding plans, I felt a deep sense of rightness about our future together. "I want something small," I said. "Just family and close friends. Nothing fancy or elaborate." "Whatever you want," Julian agreed. "Though I have to say, I'm looking forward to calling you my wife. I'm looking forward to calling you my husband." As I looked down at my grandmother's ring sparkling on my finger, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. The humiliation at Thomas's wedding had been devastating at the time, but it had also been the beginning of my real life. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us turn out to be the best things that could have happened. Our engagement party was everything I had hoped for: intimate, joyful, and filled with people who genuinely celebrated our happiness. Julian's restaurant provided the perfect setting, with twinkling lights strung across the patio and tables filled with our closest friends and family. I wore a simple blue dress that complemented my engagement ring, and I felt more beautiful than I had in years. Lily had helped plan the party, choosing flowers and designing handmade invitations that showcased her artistic talents. "You look radiant," Sandra Morrison said as she hugged me near the dessert table. "Marriage to the right person suits you." "I'm not married yet," I laughed. "Honey, you've been glowing for months. The wedding will just make it official." She was right. Julian and I had been living like partners for months already, supporting each other's dreams and building a life together that felt natural and sustainable. The party was in full swing when I noticed a commotion near the entrance. My stomach dropped as I saw Thomas pushing past Julian's staff, clearly intoxicated and obviously agitated. "Where is she?" he demanded loudly enough that conversation stopped across the patio. "Where's my wife?" Julian appeared at my side immediately, his hand warm and steady on my back. "I've already called security," he murmured. "And the police." But Thomas had spotted me. He stumbled across the patio, ignoring the attempts of several guests to intercept him. "Zara," he shouted. "We need to talk. You can't marry him. You're still my wife." "We've been divorced for 3 years, Thomas," I said clearly, my voice carrying across the now silent patio. "And you're violating a restraining order by being here." "That's just paperwork," he said, swaying dangerously. "You know we belong together. You know this is all just some kind of mistake." I felt Julian tense beside me, but I put a hand on his arm. This was my confrontation to handle. "The only mistake was staying married to you for as long as I did," I said, my voice calm but firm. "You had your chance to build a life with me, Thomas. You chose your family's jealousy over our marriage. You chose manipulation over honesty. You chose to make me feel small instead of celebrating my success." "I was protecting you," he said desperately. "My family just wanted what was best for us. Your family wanted access to my money and my connections. And you were too weak to tell them no." The words hit him like physical blows. Around us, the party guests watched in fascination and horror as my ex-husband publicly imploded for the second time in 3 years. "But I love you," he said, his voice breaking. "I've always loved you." "No, Thomas. You loved having me. You loved the status I brought to your life. You loved the way other men envied you for landing someone successful and beautiful. But you never loved me enough to protect me from people who wanted to tear me down." "That's not true." "Then why didn't you defend me when Rebecca called me stuck up at family dinners? Why didn't you shut down your cousin when he said I thought I was better than everyone? Why did you always take their side when they criticized me for working late or traveling for projects?" He had no answer because there was no answer. Every accusation I'd made was true and we both knew it. Julian loves me differently, I continued, taking my fiancé's hand. He's proud of my success instead of threatened by it. He defends me instead of making excuses for people who attack me. He makes me feel stronger, not smaller. He doesn't know you like I do, Thomas said desperately. You're right, I said. He knows me better. He knows the woman I became after I stopped trying to shrink myself to fit into your family's narrow idea of what a wife should be. Thomas looked around the patio as if seeing the assembled guests for the first time. These were successful, accomplished people, my clients, Julian's business partners, friends who had supported me through my divorce and celebrated my new business. Look around you, Thomas, I said gently. These people are here because they want to celebrate Julian and me building a life together. They're not here out of obligation or family pressure. They're here because our relationship brings out the best in both of us. You're making a mistake, he said, but his voice had lost its desperate edge. The only mistake I'm making is giving you an audience for this tantrum instead of letting security remove you immediately. As if summoned by my words, 2 security officers appeared at Thomas's elbows. Sir, you need to leave, one of them said firmly. The police are on their way. For a moment I thought Thomas might resist. But then he looked at my face, really looked, and seemed to finally see what everyone else already knew. I was done with him. Completely, irrevocably done. I hope you're happy, he said as the security officers escorted him toward the exit. I am, I called after him. For the first time in years, I really am. After Thomas was removed, the party slowly returned to its celebratory atmosphere. But several guests approached me to express their admiration for how I had handled the confrontation. That was the most dignified takedown I've ever witnessed, Nina said, raising her champagne glass. You completely destroyed him without raising your voice or losing your composure. I wasn't trying to destroy him, I said. I was just telling the truth. Sometimes the truth is destruction enough. Later that evening, as Julian and I cleaned up after the party, he pulled me into his arms on the empty patio. Are you okay? He asked. That couldn't have been easy. Actually, it was easier than I expected. 3 years ago, I might have been embarrassed or apologetic about the scene he caused. Tonight, I just felt sorry for him. Sorry for him? He spent 3 years trying to undo a decision he made in anger and desperation. He destroyed his own life and blamed everyone else for the consequences. That's not a way I'd want to live. Julian kissed my forehead. You're remarkable, you know that? I'm just a woman who learned the difference between love and control. And chose love. And chose love. As we turned off the patio lights and headed inside, I felt a profound sense of closure. Thomas's desperate interruption of our engagement party had actually been a gift, a final, public demonstration of the chaos I had escaped and the peace I had found. Tomorrow I would start planning a wedding to a man who loved me exactly as I was. Tonight I was simply grateful for the journey that had brought me home to myself. 1 year later, I stood in the bridal suite of the historic mansion where Julian and I would be married in 2 hours. The irony wasn't lost on me. It was the same mansion I had renovated for Sandra Morrison, my first major client after starting my own firm. You look absolutely stunning, Nina said as she helped me into my wedding dress. It was a simple but elegant design in ivory silk, with delicate beading on the bodice and a flowing skirt that moved like water when I walked. I feel stunning, I said, and meant it. Not because of the dress or the professional makeup, but because I felt completely, authentically myself. Lily twirled in her flower girl dress, a soft blue that complemented the wedding's color scheme. She had grown so much in the past year, not just physically but emotionally. The confident, artistic young girl she had become bore little resemblance to the anxious child who had once begged me to leave a wedding reception. Mommy, you're glowing, she said, reaching up to touch my face. Are you happy? Happier than I've ever been, sweetheart. Good. Julian's going to be the best stepdad ever. Through the window, I could see guests arriving for the ceremony. Unlike Thomas's wedding 3 years ago, this gathering felt warm and genuine. Julian's family had embraced me completely, and my own friends and family were thrilled to celebrate our union. Zara? My mother appeared in the doorway, elegant in navy blue with tears already threatening her carefully applied mascara. There's someone downstairs who wants to see you. My heart skipped. Please tell me it's not Thomas. No, sweetheart. It's Rebecca. I stared at her in surprise. Thomas's sister was the last person I had expected to see today. She says she has something important to give you. She'll understand if you don't want to see her, but she asked me to tell you it's about putting the past to rest. I considered for a moment. Rebecca and I had exchanged a few messages over the past year, mostly about her own divorce proceedings and restraining order. She had apologized repeatedly for her behavior during my marriage to Thomas, and while I had forgiven her, we certainly weren't friends. I'll see her, I decided. But only for a few minutes. Rebecca waited in the mansion's library, looking nervous and out of place among the elegant furnishings. She had lost weight and looked older than her 35 years, but there was a clarity in her eyes that hadn't been there 3 years ago. "Zara, thank you for seeing me," she said, standing as I entered. "You look absolutely beautiful." "Thank you. What did you want to give me?" She reached into her purse and pulled out a small wrapped box. This was our grandmother's. She left it to whoever Thomas married first, but she also said it should only go to someone worthy of the family name. I unwrapped the box to reveal a delicate pearl bracelet with a gold clasp engraved with an elegant P for Parker. "I should have given this to you years ago," Rebecca continued. "But I was so angry about the divorce and I blamed you for everything falling apart. I convinced myself you weren't really family." "Rebecca, you don't need to." "Yes, I do. You were the best thing that ever happened to Thomas and to our family. You brought class and intelligence and success to every gathering. You never looked down on us even though you had every right to. And we destroyed it because we were jealous and small-minded." She took a shaky breath. "I've spent the last year in therapy, dealing with my own abusive marriage and learning about toxic family dynamics. I understand now what we did to you. How we undermined your marriage from the beginning because we felt threatened by your success." I looked down at the bracelet, touched by the gesture despite our complicated history. "I want you to have this as an apology," Rebecca said, "and as recognition that you were always the daughter our family needed. Even if we were too stupid to appreciate you." "I appreciate this, Rebecca. Really. But I'm not a Parker anymore. In about an hour, I'll be Mrs. Brooks." "I know. But for 7 years you were a Parker. And you were the best one of us all." After Rebecca left, I sat in the library for a few minutes, processing the encounter. 3 years ago, I would have been angry about receiving this recognition so late. Now, I simply felt sad for the time we had all wasted on misunderstandings and jealousy. "Everything okay?" Julian appeared in the doorway, handsome in his classic black tuxedo. "You're not supposed to see me before the ceremony," I protested, though I made no move to hide from him. "I was worried when Nina said Rebecca was here. I wanted to make sure you were all right." "I'm perfect," I said, standing to straighten his tie. "Are you ready to marry me, Mr. Brooks?" "I've been ready since our first lunch meeting," he said, kissing my forehead. "Are you ready to become Mrs. Brooks?" "More than ready." The ceremony was everything I had dreamed of: intimate, meaningful, and filled with joy. Julian's vows made me cry, especially when he promised to celebrate your ambitions, support your dreams, and never ask you to be anything less than the remarkable woman you are. My own vows focused on gratitude for second chances, for learning to trust again, and for finding a partner who made me feel stronger rather than smaller. Lily beamed as she scattered rose petals down the aisle, and she cheered loudly when Julian and I kissed as husband and wife. The reception was held in the mansion's garden, with dancing under string lights and a menu featuring Julian's restaurant's signature dishes. I felt like I was floating through a perfect dream. Speech. Someone called during dinner and Julian stood with his champagne glass raised. 3 years ago, he began, my wife attended another wedding where she was treated terribly by people who should have cherished her. If she hadn't had the courage to leave that toxic situation, we never would have met. So I want to thank those people for being so awful that they drove the most amazing woman in the world straight into my arms. The crowd laughed and applauded, but I was struck by the truth of his words. Thomas's family's cruelty at his wedding had been the catalyst for everything good that had happened since. As the evening wound down, I found myself on the mansion's terrace with my new husband, watching the last of our guests enjoy the party. "Any regrets?" Julian asked, pulling me close. "Only that it took me so long to believe I deserved this kind of happiness." "Well, you have the rest of our lives to make up for lost time." "I love you, husband." "I love you too, wife." As we swayed together to the music drifting from the garden, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. The humiliation at Thomas's wedding, the painful divorce, the struggles of single motherhood, the fear of starting my own business, all of it had been necessary to become the woman who was strong enough to recognize real love when it appeared. My phone buzzed with a text message. For a split second, I tensed, expecting it to be Thomas with some desperate plea or angry rant. Instead, it was from one of my newest clients. "Saw the wedding photos on social media. You look radiant. Can't wait to start our project next month. Congratulations on your happy ending." I smiled and put the phone away. This wasn't a happy ending, it was a happy beginning. At 41 years old, I was finally living the life I had always been meant to live. I had a thriving business that fulfilled my creative passions. I had a daughter who was confident and secure. I had a husband who loved me not in spite of my strength but because of it. And somewhere across town, Thomas was living with the consequences of his choices alone, bitter, and still unable to understand that he had destroyed the best thing in his life with his own hands. As Julian and I danced under the stars, I felt nothing but gratitude for the path that had led me here. Sometimes the worst betrayals lead to the greatest victories. Sometimes losing everything is the only way to find out who you really are. I had found out who I really was: a woman worthy of real love, capable of building an empire, strong enough to protect her daughter and herself from people who didn't deserve them. The little girl who had warned me to leave Thomas's wedding reception had been right. Something bad was going to happen that night. But it hadn't happened to us. It had happened to the people who thought they could tear me down. Instead, I had risen higher than any of them could have imagined. And this was only the beginning.